My husband booked a luxury cabin retreat for our entire extended family except me. Before pulling out of the driveway, he said, "Make sure you water the tomatoes while we're gone." We had been married 21 years. I want to explain what those years actually looked like, because society hears a wife walked out and immediately pictures thrown plates, pictures shattering glass, pictures some explosive screaming match in a kitchen. Instead, it was 21 years of folding myself up so neatly that eventually, I'm not sure anyone realized I was suffocating in the dark. His name is Conrad. When we met, he had a lot of big ideas and absolutely no follow-through. I bankrolled his physical therapy clinic by pulling overnight shifts at a 24-hour logistics hub. I spent 6 years coming home at 6 in the morning, smelling like dust and diesel fumes, just to shower, drink a pot of cheap coffee, and do the bookkeeping for his practice. I completely missed my own brother Ellis's wedding because Conrad scheduled his clinic's grand opening the same Saturday and insisted he couldn't survive without my administrative help. I smiled and said I understood. I sent Ellis a toaster. For a long time, the marriage functioned the way most do. Imperfectly, but solidly. He had the visions, I was the anchor, and we constructed a convincing life. We had a colonial house with a wraparound porch. We had 2 daughters, Nora and Claire. Then Conrad's younger brother Silas went through a messy bankruptcy and needed a place to crash. I said, of course he can stay. I thought it would be a month. Silas moved into our basement suite on a Thursday in October with 3 duffel bags and immense entitlement. Within a month, he overtook our 2-car garage to build a custom motorcycle. He stained the concrete with engine oil and blasted classic rock until midnight. Within 4 months, he was dictating our weekend schedules, inviting chaotic friends over without asking, and drinking the wine I saved for special occasions. I came home from grocery shopping one afternoon to find him and a guy named Callum sitting on my patio, drinking a 2018 Cabernet I had been saving for my anniversary. Callum was using my good linen napkins to wipe grease off his hands. Conrad just watched it happen. Every time I tried to express my frustration, using those measured tones you develop when desperate not to start a fight, he would sigh. He would rub his temples, look at me with exhausting pity, and say, "He's in a dark place right now. Just give him some grace." As if my boundaries were simply an inconvenience disrupting his brother's healing process. I stopped complaining. It was quieter. I convinced myself quiet meant peace. The morning of the mountain retreat, I stood on the porch and watched them pile into 2 rented SUVs. They had been planning this trip for 3 months. It was meant to celebrate Conrad's parents' anniversary. His parents, his uncle, Silas, and our 2 college-age daughters were all going. Nora and Claire were loading snowboards into the back, laughing loudly at something Silas was saying. I had paid for those snowboards. I had paid for Nora's tuition just 2 weeks prior. Conrad jogged back up the steps once. I actually held my breath. A pathetic, lingering part of me thought he might apologize. I thought he might suddenly realize how insane it was to leave me behind to manage the contractor doing our roof repairs while they drank hot toddies in a hot tub. Instead, he patted my shoulder. He didn't kiss me. He just patted my shoulder like a golden retriever and reminded me to check the tomatoes. I stood on the porch until the taillights vanished at the end of our street. Then I walked into his home office. On his mahogany desk was a bright yellow clipboard with the weekend's itinerary. My name wasn't just left off the guest list. Pinned beneath it was a typed schedule, drafted by Silas, explicitly outlining my daily chores. The font was a mocking, bold Arial. Feed the dogs at 6, meet the roofers at 8, pick up Silas's dry cleaning on Monday, pick up specialty beer for their return on Tuesday. My existence had been so thoroughly reduced to unpaid labor that they were assigning me homework in my own house. I set the clipboard down. I called my oldest friend in Seattle, Margot. I told her I was coming. She has known me for 3 decades, and she didn't demand an explanation. She just said, "I'll make up the guest bed." I packed my car with the cold efficiency of a woman who had been planning this escape for 9 straight months. People think you snap and leave. You don't. You wake up one Tuesday, look at the man across the kitchen island, realize you feel absolutely nothing, and you start making lists. 9 months ago, I quietly opened a secure lockbox at a different bank, slowly transferring my inherited bonds from my late mother. I had the clinic's valuation secretly audited by an independent forensic accountant named Duncan Voss. I had consulted a divorce shark named Vivian Mercer 3 times, claiming I was at a yoga retreat. Vivian was ruthless, expensive, and entirely lacking in empathy. I liked her immediately. I walked through the house one last time. I took my grandmother's quilt from the cedar chest. I took exactly 1 photo, me at 23, standing on the beach before I ever met Conrad, smiling wildly into the wind before I learned to shrink. I stood in the hallway for 5 minutes, the same hallway where I had painted the trim on my hands and knees while Conrad and Silas watched golf. I didn't leave a dramatic letter. I didn't smash a plate. A house that treats you like a ghost doesn't deserve a goodbye. I drove west. I didn't stop until I hit Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I pulled into a gas station, filled the tank, and walked over to the concrete trash cans near the air pump. I took my phone out of my purse. I had 14 unread messages in the family group chat, mostly photos of Silas posing with a snowboard, and one from Conrad reminding me not to let the roofer track mud on the carpets. I dropped the phone into the trash can next to a half-eaten hot dog and got back on the highway. Conrad didn't realize anything was wrong until Sunday night at the cabin. I was already sitting in Margot's kitchen in Seattle, drinking tea and watching the rain hit her skylight. I had bought a cheap prepaid phone at a pharmacy. Vivian had assured me she had it timed perfectly. When Conrad walked back into cellular range on Sunday evening, expecting to ask me if I paid the gas bill, he didn't get my voicemail. He opened his email to find a 42-page PDF from Vivian's office, forensic accounting ledgers, asset freezes, and a court-ordered mandate regarding regarding the immediate sale of the clinic. It felt incredibly hollow. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt exhausted. I slept for 14 hours straight in Margot's guest room. When I woke up on Monday morning, the prepaid phone was buzzing on the nightstand. It was Vivian. I cleared my throat and answered. Did he sign the acknowledgement of service? Vivian didn't offer a greeting. Her voice was tight, clipped. He was served. But we have a problem. I just got off the phone with opposing counsel. He retained Fletcher Strand. Strand is a bulldog, and he didn't waste the morning. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. What does that mean? The assets are frozen. They were supposed to be, Vivian said. Her tone was dangerously calm. But your husband emptied the clinic's main operating account on Wednesday afternoon, the day before he left for the cabin. $140,000. He wired it to a newly registered LLC. My stomach dropped. He can't do that. That's marital property. He can if he claims it was a business expense, Vivian replied. He's claiming the initial seed money for the clinic didn't come from your wages at the logistics hub. He produced a notarized document stating it was a loan from his brother. He wired the money to Silas. Silas is countersuing for 80% ownership of the clinic, claiming back pay and interest. They are trying to tank the valuation before a judge even looks at the divorce. I gripped the phone. The sheer audacity of it burned the back of my throat. Silas hadn't had a dime to his name in 10 years. The notarized document was a forgery, signed retroactively. They had planned this. While I was packing my car, thinking I was the one pulling the rug out, Conrad had already stolen the floorboards. Before I could respond to Vivian, Margot walked into the guest room holding her laptop. Her face was pale. She didn't say a word, just turned the screen toward. It was an email from Nora. The subject line was empty. Aunt Margot, I know Mom is there with you. Tell her not to bother calling me or Claire ever again. Dad is a wreck. Silas had to max out his only credit card to pay for the cabin rental because Mom emptied their accounts and ran away. How could she do this to us? She's sick. I stared at the glowing screen until the words began to blur. She's sick. My own daughter. I had spent 20 years buffering Nora from Conrad's chronic disappointments. When he forgot to pick her up from middle school because he was pitching a terrible app idea to a stranger at a coffee shop, I told her his car broke down. When he missed her high school graduation to attend a weekend business seminar, I bought her a gold necklace and said he had been begging for months to find the perfect gift. I built the pedestal she put him on, and now he was standing on it, kicking me in the teeth. Vivian's voice crackled through the phone I was still holding against my ear. Are you still there? What is going on? He got to the girls, I said. My voice sounded thin, like it belonged to someone else. He told them I drained their accounts and abandoned them. He told them Silas had to pay for the cabin. Vivian let out a sharp breath. Standard alienation tactic. He's securing his character witnesses and cutting off your emotional support. Listen to me. Do not text them back. Do not call them defending yourself. That is exactly what Fletcher Strand wants. He wants you erratic, defensive, and typing out emotional emails we have to explain in a deposition. She's my daughter, I said. She's an adult, Vivian corrected sharply. And right now, she is a hostile witness. We focus on the money. If we prove he forged the loan document from Silas, the narrative collapses. How did you pay for the clinic's startup costs? I need the paper trail. I hung up the phone and looked at Margot. She gently closed the laptop. It was 2005, I told Margot. I worked at a freight depot. I kept the cash in a shoebox for the first 6 months because I didn't trust Conrad not to spend it on marketing materials before we even had a lease. Then I deposited it into a joint account at a credit union. Margot crossed her arms. Which credit union? Whitfield Community. Margot pulled her phone out. She typed for a few seconds. Whitfield went under in 2011. They were absorbed by a national bank. Getting records from a defunct regional branch from 2 decades ago is going to take a subpoena. And even then, they might just have microfiche. I closed my eyes. The exhaustion wasn't just physical anymore. It felt like a heavy leaden blanket pressing down on my lungs. Conrad knew this. He knew the paper trail was buried under 20 years of corporate buyouts and faded receipts. He knew Silas had been bankrupt, so any money Silas loaned him couldn't be easily traced either. They had sat in that basement suite, drinking my wine, constructing a financial fiction. I needed something concrete. I walked over to the corner of the guest room where I had dropped my bags. I opened the cedar chest I had taken from the house. It smelled like mothballs and dried lavender. I had packed my grandmother's quilt, some winter sweaters, and a metal firebox where I kept old passports and birth certificates. I keyed open the box. There were no bank statements from 2005, but there was a stack of W-2s held together by a brittle rubber band. I pulled out the form from 2005. Employer, Kellner Logistics. Wages, tips, other comp, $41,200. I took a picture of it and sent it to Vivian. She called back in less than a minute. It's a start, she said, but a W-2 just proves you earned money. It doesn't prove that specific money funded the clinic. I need the bridge between this W-2 and the clinic's first commercial lease. The commercial lease, I repeated. I thought back to that cramped, terrible office we rented above a dry cleaner. I remembered the smell of the chemicals seeping through the floorboards while I painted the walls. I remembered signing the paperwork with the landlord, an older man who smoked cheap cigars and insisted on a cashier's check. His name was Pierce Brennan. The landlord, I said into the phone. Pierce Brennan. He owned the building. He made me get a cashier's check from my personal account because Conrad's credit score was a disaster. If I can find him, he might still have the original lease and the ledger. Find him, Vivian said. I'll start drafting the motion for discovery on Silas's new LLC. Don't talk to your kids. She hung up again. I spent the next 4 hours sitting at Margot's kitchen island, drinking black tea and digging through property tax records on the county assessor's website. Pierce Brennan had sold the building in 2015. I found a forwarding address in Arizona, but the phone number attached to it was disconnected. I finally found a Facebook page for a woman named Petra Brennan, who looked looked like she could be his daughter. I sent a message. It sat in her message requests folder. Unseen. At 2 in the afternoon, my prepaid phone vibrated on the granite counter. It was an unsaved number, but the area code was from home. Margot looked up from the sink where she was washing mugs. I stared at the phone. I knew I shouldn't answer. Vivian had been explicit, but it wasn't Nora's number. It was Claire's. I swiped the green button. Claire, Mom. Her voice was a whisper. It was shaking. Are you okay? The relief hit me so hard my knees went weak. I leaned heavily against the island. I'm safe, sweetie. I'm with Margot. Nora is so angry, Claire whispered. I could hear a door closing in the background. A lock clicking. She was hiding. Dad is acting crazy. He threw a glass against the fireplace this morning. He keeps saying you ruined his life. Claire, listen to me. I kept my voice steady, masking the spike of panic. Conrad never threw things. He sulked. He manipulated. Physical outbursts were new. I didn't take their money. I took my inheritance. The bonds from Grandma. He emptied the clinic accounts, not me. There was a long silence on the line. Claire? I know, she said quietly. I heard them talking in the garage last night. Silas and Dad. My grip on the phone tight. What did they say? Silas was laughing. He said, the bitch actually did it. She left. And Dad said, it doesn't matter. The account is clean. Mom, I don't know what's going on, but Silas has a bunch of papers in his duffel bag. Real estate brochures. Commercial listings in Nevada. I saw them when I was looking for a phone charger. The basement suite. The custom motorcycle. The sudden, intense bond between the brothers after years of distance. It wasn't just a bankruptcy bailout. Silas wasn't healing in our basement. He was helping Conrad hide assets. They weren't just trying to squeeze me out of the divorce settlement. They were liquidating the business to start over somewhere else, completely cutting me out of the equity I had built for 20 years. Claire, I need you to stay out of Silas's things, I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. Don't go looking for anything. Do not tell them you talked to me. Mom, there's something else. Her voice cracked. She sounded so young, terrified. Dad told Nora you've been having an affair. He said that's why you left. He gave her a name, Duncan Voss. He showed her a credit card statement with a charge for a hotel in the city and said you were meeting Duncan there. Duncan Voss, the forensic accountant I had hired. His firm was based in the city. I had paid his retainer with a credit card, and I had stayed at a cheap hotel near his office during the 2 days we reviewed the clinic's books, telling Conrad I was at a yoga retreat. Conrad had found the statement, and instead of realizing I was investigating his finances, he spun it into an affair to completely destroy my relationship with my daughters. It's a lie, I said, my voice completely flat. Duncan is an accountant, Claire. I hired him to look at the clinic's books. I believe you, she said, sniffing. But Nora doesn't. She printed out the statement. She's driving to Duncan's office right now. She said she's going to confront him in front of his whole firm. The blood drained from my face. If Nora caused a scene at Duncan's firm, if she started screaming about an affair, Duncan could drop me as a client. He was a highly respected professional. He wouldn't tolerate being dragged into a messy domestic dispute, especially one involving unhinged public accusations from a college student. Without Duncan's audit, I had no proof of the clinic's true valuation. I would lose the only leverage I had against Conrad and Silas. How long ago did she leave? I asked, already pacing toward the hallway. 20 minutes, Claire said. Mom, she's really erratic. She wouldn't listen to me. Okay, thank you for telling me. Stay in your room. I love you. I ended the call. I didn't have time to explain it to Margot. I just grabbed the keys to my car off the hook by the door. Seattle to the city where Duncan's office was located was a 4-hour drive. I couldn't beat Nora there. I couldn't physically stop her. I dialed Duncan's office number as I ran to the car. It rang 3 times. Voss and Associates, this is Simone. Simone, I need to speak to Duncan immediately. It's a massive emergency. I'm sorry, mister. Voss is in a client meeting until 3. Can I take a message? No, I barked, getting into the driver's seat and slamming the door. You need to pull him out. Right now. Ma'am, I cannot interrupt a consultation. Listen to me. I interrupted, my voice dropping to a harsh, desperate register. A young woman is going to walk through your front doors in about 40 minutes. She is going to start screaming that Duncan is sleeping with a married client. It is a lie manufactured by my husband, but she is highly volatile. You need to get security to the front desk, and you need to get Duncan out of the lobby. There was dead silence on the line. I could hear the faint click of a keyboard stopping. What is your name? Simone asked, her professional customer service tone completely gone. I gave her my name. Hold on. The line went silent, filled with hold music. I started the car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I put the car in reverse, backing out of Margot's driveway into the gray Seattle drizzle. The hold music clicked off. It wasn't Simone who answered. It was a man. His voice was deep, gravelly, and furious. This is Duncan. What the hell is going on? I explained it in 4 sharp sentences. I didn't apologize, because apologies make you sound guilty, and I wasn't guilty of anything except trusting a man who was actively dismantling my life. My husband found the credit card statement for the hotel I stayed at while reviewing the clinic's books with you, I said, merging onto Interstate 5. He told my 20-year-old daughter we are having an affair. She is driving to your office right now to expose us. She is hurt, she is angry, and she is entirely convinced it's the truth. Duncan exhaled slowly. The gravelly anger in his voice shifted into something colder, more calculating. What kind of car does she drive? A silver Honda Civic. License plate ends in 4BW. She'll be wearing a green canvas jacket. Please, Duncan. She's just a kid who thinks she's defending her father. She's an adult walking into a corporate building to scream at a stranger, Duncan corrected. I will have building security intercept her at the front desk. I will bring her into an empty conference room on the ground floor. But listen to me carefully. If she causes a scene that impacts my firm, or if one of my partners catches wind of this drama, I am dropping you as a client. I am an accountant, not a divorce mediator. Do not drive here. You will only escalate her. He hung up before I could answer. I pulled off the highway at the next exit and parked in the back of a strip mall lot. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the windshield. I sat with the engine idling, the heat blasting, staring at the flashing neon sign of a dry cleaner. I couldn't go to the city. I couldn't go back to Margot's yet. I just had to sit in the damp, humming silence of a Honda Car-V and wait to find out if my daughter was going to ruin the only financial lifeline I had left. An hour passed, then another. I checked the prepaid phone every 30 seconds. Nothing from Claire, nothing from Vivian, nothing from Duncan. At 1:15 p.m., the phone finally vibrated. It was Duncan. I answered on the first ring. Did she show up? She did, Duncan said. His voice was exhausted. The sharp edge was gone. Security flagged her. She was crying before she even made it to the receptionist. I brought her into the conference room. I slumped against the steering wheel, closing my eyes. Thank God. Duncan, I am so sorry. Did she scream? No, he said quietly. She didn't scream. She just sat down and threw a printed copy of your hotel receipt across the table at me. She asked me how I could ruin her family, so I broke protocol. I opened my laptop and showed her our engagement letter. I showed her the forensic audit contract with your signature and my signature dated exactly when you stayed at that hotel. I showed her the emails where we discussed the clinic's tax returns. I proved to her, mathematically and legally, that I was working for you, not sleeping with you. Did she believe you? Numbers don't lie, Duncan said. She believed me. But that's not why I'm calling you. When she realized her father had lied about the affair, she completely broke down. She started rambling, trying to make sense of why he would make it up, and she said something you need to know about. I sat up straight. What did she say? She said Conrad told her he had to take out a second mortgage on the house last month just to keep the lights on, because you were recklessly spending their savings. The air in the car suddenly felt incredibly thin. A second mortgage? I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. We own the house outright. We paid off the mortgage 3 years ago. Not anymore. You don't, Duncan said. I ran a quick title search on your property while she was sitting in my office crying. I didn't look at your personal real estate during the clinic audit because it wasn't in the scope of my contract, but I just looked. 35 days ago, Conrad took out a home equity line of credit for $250,000 against your house. He forged your signature on the loan documents. The notary who stamped it is someone named Callum Ashby. Callum, the guy, sitting on my patio. The guy wiping motorcycle grease on my good linen napkins while drinking my anniversary wine. Silas's friend. He took out $250,000, I whispered. My hands were completely numb. Where did the money go? I don't know, Duncan said. That money never touched the clinic's accounts. Between the $140,000 he drained from the business and the $250,000 he pulled out of your house, your husband is sitting on nearly $400,000 in untraceable cash, and you are half responsible for that debt. He had gutted the house. While I was painting the trim, while I was carefully planning my exit, counting the days until the mountain retreat, Conrad and Silas were legally robbing me blind. They weren't just securing a nest egg. They were burning the entire structure to the ground and leaving me to pay for the ashes. Where is Nora now? I asked. I put her in an Uber, Duncan said. She was too shaken to drive. Her car is in our parking garage. She said she was going back to the house to pack her things. She doesn't want to be around him right now. Thank you, Duncan. Really, I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I will pay you double your hourly rate for dealing with this today. Just find that original lease, he replied. You need to prove you funded the clinic initially. Otherwise, Fletcher Strand is going to bury you under this new debt. You are running out of time. He hung up. I didn't start the car immediately. I sat in the parking lot and watched a woman run through the rain holding a newspaper over her head. I felt a cold, hard knot tightening in my stomach. The sadness was gone. The quiet, suffocating resignation that had defined my marriage for the last decade vanished entirely. It was replaced by an absolute, crystal clear rage. I dialed Vivian's number. She answered with her usual clipped efficiency. Mercer, I need you to freeze the house, I said. I can't freeze real estate that easily without a judge's order, and we are already fighting over the clinic he forged my signature on a $250,000 HELOC 35 days ago. I interrupted. The notary is a friend of Silas's named Callum Ashby. He didn't just drain the clinic, Vivian. He mortgaged our paid-off house and hid the cash. There was a long pause on the other end. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had dropped an octave. It was the voice of a shark smelling blood in the water. Send me the notary's name in a text. I am filing an emergency injunction for fraud. If he forged a mortgage document, this isn't just family court anymore. It's a federal banking crime. Do it, I said. I'm warning you, Vivian said. If I file this, Fletcher Strand will go nuclear. They will stop playing defense and start coming for you directly. They will try to prove you knew about the loan and are lying to cover your tracks. I have the text from Nora, I said, and I'm finding Pierce Brennan. I hung up, threw the car into drive, and pulled back onto the highway. I drove straight to Margot's house. I didn't care about the speed limit. I didn't care about the rain. When I walked through Margot's front door, she was standing in the kitchen, staring at her laptop. Did you get hold of Pierce Brennan? I asked, shrugging off my wet coat. Margot looked up. Her expression was strange. Not panicked, just profoundly uncomfortable. No, but someone else answered the message. I stopped walking. Who? His daughter, Petra. Margot turned the laptop screen toward me. She replied to the Facebook message you sent. I walked around the kitchen island and leaned over the screen. Petra Brennan, my father passed away in 2019. If you are looking for records regarding the commercial lease at 402 Elm Street, you need to speak to my uncle. He managed all the bookkeeping for the property before Dad sold it. His name is Ellis Kellner, your brother. I stared at the screen until the pixels seemed to vibrate. Tara, I whispered. The name scraped out of my throat like rusted metal. Ellis married Tara Brennan. Margot frowned, resting her hand hands on the edge of the island. Your sister-in-law? Yes, I said, leaning my weight onto the counter because my legs suddenly felt entirely useless. In 2005, the same year we signed the commercial lease for the clinic. Pierce Brennan wasn't just some random landlord. He was Tara's older brother. He owned the building, and my brother Ellis did his bookkeeping. The sickening, suffocating irony of it settled over me like wet cement. I hadn't just missed my brother's wedding to do administrative work for Conrad's grand opening. I had missed my brother's wedding to Tara Brennan, the very wedding that had connected us to the rental space in the first place. I had handed my cashier's check to Pierce Brennan on a Tuesday, and that Saturday, while Pierce was giving away his sister at the altar, I was sitting in a dusty storefront 30 miles away, assembling waiting room chairs, because Conrad told me we couldn't afford to lose a single weekend of prep time. I sent them a toaster, a stainless steel 4-slice toaster from a department store registry. I didn't even write a personal note in the card. Conrad had dictated a generic wishing you a lifetime of happiness while driving us to a hardware store. I haven't spoken to Ellis in 4 years, I said, staring blankly at the dark granite countertop. The last time was a 5-minute phone call when our mother's estate was finalized. Before that, it was Christmas 2014. He stopped inviting us to things because Conrad would always find an excuse to cancel at the last minute. You have to call him, Margot said quietly. If he managed Pierce's books, he has the ledger. He's the only one who can prove you funded the clinic. I picked up the prepaid phone. I dialed Ellis's number from memory, praying he hadn't changed it in the last decade. It rang 4 times. I braced myself for voicemail. Hello? His voice was deeper than I remembered. Thicker. Ellis, I said. It's me. There was a profound, heavy silence on the line. I could hear a television playing faintly in the background, a low murmur of a newscast. I could hear the rhythmic chopping of a knife against a wooden cutting board. He was making dinner. He was living a completely normal life. Are you okay? He finally asked. He didn't sound warm. He sounded cautious, like a man approaching a stray dog that might bite. No, I said. I didn't try to soften it. I didn't try to construct a narrative where I was in control. I left Conrad. I'm in Seattle at Margot's house. Conrad is trying to liquidate the clinic, and he took out a forged $250,000 mortgage on the house. He is trying to bury me. Ellis, the chopping in the background stopped. You left him? Friday, he went to the cabin with his family and the girls, and I packed my car. Another long pause. I heard a muffled voice, Tara, asking who was on the phone. I heard Ellis say my name, and the immediate chilling silence that followed it. I need your help. I forced the words out, swallowing my pride, swallowing 20 years of neglected birthdays and superficial apologies. I need the original 2005 ledger for the Elm Street property. Pierce's daughter said you managed the books. Conrad is claiming the clinic's seed money was a loan from Silas. If I can't prove my personal cashier's check paid for the first 6 months of the lease, I lose everything. I will be drowning in his debt for the rest of my life. I heard a heavy sigh, the sound of a man who was too old and too tired to deal with the collateral damage of a sister he barely knew anymore. I still have Pierce's old files, Ellis said slowly. When he got sick in 2018, I boxed up the basement of the management office. They're in my attic, but I'm not scanning 20-year-old ledgers and emailing them to you like this is just a quick favor. Ellis, please, I live in Portland now, he interrupted. If you want these records, you get in your car, you drive down here, and you look my wife in the eye. You sat in that man's shadow for 2 decades, while he treated our family like an inconvenience. You missed my wedding. You missed Pierce's funeral. You let Conrad isolate you until you were nothing but a ghost to us. If you want my help saving your life, you are going to come here and acknowledge the people you threw away to build it. I'll leave right now, I said. We're at 4210 Dunn S.E. Hawthorne, he said, and hung up. I didn't pack a bag. I just grabbed my keys, thanked Margot, and walked back out into the relentless Pacific Northwest rain. The drive from Seattle to Portland took exactly 3 hours and 15 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. I just gripped the steering wheel and watched the red taillights of the semi-trucks blur in the downpour. My mind kept snapping back to the image of Conrad and Silas in our basement, plotting, forging a $250,000 loan with Callum Ashby, sitting there drinking my wine, comfortable in the absolute certainty that I was too beaten down to ever look closely at the bank statements. I pulled onto Hawthorne Boulevard just after 7 in the evening. Ellis's house was a 1920s craftsman, with a wide porch and warm yellow light spilling from the front windows. It looked like a home, not a staged asset, not a sterile monument to someone's ego, just a home. I parked on the street, turned off the engine, and sat in the dark for a full minute. I was 51 years old. I had exactly one friend in the world, 2 daughters who currently believed I was a thief and an adulterer, and a brother who was forcing me to face my own cowardice. I got out of the car and walked up the steps. Before I could knock, the front door opened. Tara stood in the entryway. She was wearing a gray cardigan over a faded band t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a messy clip. The last time I saw her, she was 26, laughing in a crowded restaurant at her engagement dinner, while Conrad loudly complained to the waiter about the wine list. Now, there were deep lines around her eyes. She looked at me, taking in my soaked jacket and my exhausted face. She didn't hug me. She didn't smile. We got a toaster, she said. Her voice was painfully flat. My brother rented you a commercial space below market rate because you were family, and you couldn't even be bothered to show up to the church. I'm sorry, I said. My voice broke. I didn't cry, but the physical ache in my chest was so sharp it took my breath away. I know sorry doesn't cover a decade of absence. I was surviving, Tara. I just didn't realize I was entirely complicit in my own isolation. She stared at me for a few more seconds. Then she stepped aside. Take your shoes off. The floors are original. I walked into the hallway. Ellis was standing at the entrance to the kitchen. He looked older than I was prepared for. His hair was entirely gray at the temples. We shared the same jawline, the same dark eyes, but his face had settled into a kind of grounded peace that I had never possessed. He didn't say hello. He just turned and walked toward the back of the house. They're in the office. I followed him into a small room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. On a large wooden desk sat 3 dusty cardboard banker's boxes. The labels on the side read Brennan Properties 2004-2008. I brought them down from the attic while you were driving, Ellis said, pulling open the lid of the first box. The smell of old paper and dust filled the room. Pierce kept everything. The man didn't trust digital banking until the day he died. Everything was logged in a physical ledger. He pulled out a heavy green canvas-bound book. He laid it flat on the desk and flipped past dozens of pages filled with neat, handwritten columns. I stood next to him, my heart hammering against my ribs. If this wasn't here, Vivian's strategy was dead. Fletcher Strand would tear me apart in court, burying me under Silas's fake loan and the forged mortgage. Ellis's fingers stopped near the bottom of a page dated November 2005. There it was. Tenant, Conrad and Kellner, DBA, Apex Physical Therapy. Deposit and first 6 mo, $41,200. Paid via cashier's check, hashtag 884920, Whitfield Community. It has your name on it, Ellis said quietly. It specifically lists your name alongside his as a joint tenant, and it matches the exact amount you withdrew from the credit union. This is your proof of equity. I let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding since Friday morning. I reached out to touch the page, the ink faded but undeniably legible. Thank you, Ellis. Thank you so much. Take a picture of it, he said, stepping back from the desk, and I'll write an affidavit confirming its authenticity. I pulled out the prepaid phone and snapped 3 clear, well-lit photos of the ledger page. I immediately attached them to an email and sent them to Vivian. I looked back at the box. There were thick manila folders wedged beside the ledgers. One of them had Apex Physical Therapy lease agreements written in Pierce's unmistakable block lettering. Can I look in there? I asked. Vivian might need the original lease contract too. Ellis nodded, leaning against the doorframe. Take whatever you need. I pulled the heavy folder out and opened it. Inside were the carbon copies of our original 2005 lease. But there was something else tucked behind it. A piece of heavy, cream-colored stationery folded in thirds. I recognized the paper. Conrad used to special order it for his professional correspondence. I unfolded it. The date at the top was September 14, 2006, 10 months after we opened the clinic. It was a letter addressed directly to Pierce Brennan. Pierce, I am writing to formally request an amendment to the commercial lease for 402 Elm Street. When we initiated the contract, my wife was included as a joint tenant for administrative purposes. As the business has now stabilized, I need the lease restructured to reflect myself as the sole proprietor and sole tenant. My wife is merely an employee of Apex Physical Therapy, and moving forward, I require all equity and liability to be solely in my name. Please send the revised documents to my home office. Best, Conrad. I stopped breathing. 10 months. We had been married for 5 years at that point. I was working overnight shifts at the logistics hub to pay our home mortgage while doing his books for free during the day. And behind my back, using his expensive stationery, he was already trying to legally erase me from the business I bought for him. Below Conrad's signature, Pierce had written a note in red ink. Refused. 10-206. Check came from her account. Told him to kick rocks. I stared at Pierce's red handwriting. The landlord I barely knew, the brother of the bride whose wedding I missed, had protected me when my own husband was trying to cut my throat. Conrad had known, 18 years ago, that he couldn't get my name off the lease without Pierce's cooperation. That's why he needed Silas's fake loan now. He was finally executing a plan he had been quietly harboring for 2 decades. What is it? Tara asked. I hadn't realized she had walked into the room. I handed her the letter. I couldn't speak. My throat was entirely closed off. Tara read it. She didn't gasp. She just pressed her lips together into a thin, furious line and handed it to Ellis. Ellis read it in silence. He always viewed you as a utility, Ellis said softly, dropping the letter onto the desk. You were just a battery he plugged into until he had enough charge to run on his own. My prepaid phone buzzed in my pocket. I flinched, pulling it out. It was a text message from Claire. Mom, Nora just came to the house. She didn't say a word to Dad or Silas. She went into her bedroom, packed 2 suitcases and left. I tried to stop her, but she locked her car doors. She looked terrified. I typed back immediately. Where did she go? Did she say anything? A minute passed. Then the 3 gray typing bubbles appeared. No. But after she left, Dad lost his mind. He started screaming at Silas. He told Silas to fix it before Fletcher Strand finds out. Mom, they aren't going to Nevada anymore. Silas is in the garage right now loading the motorcycle onto a trailer. He's leaving. Leave the house, I typed back immediately. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone on the desk, picked it up, and forced my thumbs to steady. Right now, Claire, don't pack suitcases. Just grab a backpack. Get your laptop, your passport, and your phone charger. Get in your car and drive to Margot's. I will meet you there. I watched the screen. 10 seconds passed. Then the gray bubble appeared. Okay, he's still in the garage yelling at Silas. I'm going out the front door. Drive straight here, I wrote. Do not stop. I locked the screen and looked up. Ellis and Tara were watching me, the heavy silence of the office pressing in around us. I have to go back to Seattle, I said, my voice tight. Conrad is losing control of the narrative, and Silas is bailing on him. My youngest daughter is sneaking out of her own home right now because her father is screaming in the driveway. Ellis didn't ask questions. He didn't offer empty comforts. He just reached out, closed the heavy green canvas ledger, and placed the 2006 letter squarely on top of it. He slid both into a thick, reinforced manila mailing envelope from his desk drawer and wrapped the string closure tight. He handed it to me. Take the originals, Ellis said. Don't leave them in your car. Take them straight into Margot's house and hand them to your lawyer tomorrow morning. I took the envelope. It felt impossibly heavy for a stack of paper. It felt like 20 years of my life, quantified, appraised, and finally, undeniably real. Thank you, I said. I looked at Tara. I am going to fix this. And when the dust settles, I would like to come back, if you'll let me. Tara crossed her arms over her chest. The anger in her face had fractured, leaving something deeply sad underneath. She gave a single, tight nod. Drive safe. The roads through Olympia are a mess in the rain. I walked out of the Craftsman house and got back into my car. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. I set the envelope on the passenger seat and started the engine. Before I put it in drive, I took a picture of the 2006 letter and emailed it to Vivian with the subject line, premeditation. I have the original. I pulled away from the curb and merged back onto Interstate 5 North. The drive back felt entirely different than the drive down. The panic was still there, a low hum vibrating in my jaw, but it was anchored now. I wasn't grasping at shadows anymore. I had the ledger. I had Pierce's reading. I had proof. An hour into the drive, my phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. It was Vivian. I got the email, she said. No greeting. Where are you? Driving back to Seattle, I said, keeping my eyes on the slick road. I went to Portland. My brother was Pierce Brennan's bookkeeper. He had the physical archives. You have the physical letter? The original? Sitting on my passenger seat. I heard Vivian let out a long, slow breath. It was the first time she sounded something resembling relief. Okay, this changes the board. Fletcher Strand relies on the presumption that his client is acting in good faith but under financial duress. This letter proves Conrad intended to defraud you of your equity before the business was even profitable. It establishes a pattern of financial concealment that makes his new HELOC and the LLC transfer look exactly like what they are, a coordinated theft. Silas is leaving, I told her. My daughter texted me. Conrad and Silas were screaming at each other in the garage, and Silas was loading his motorcycle onto a trailer. He's running, Vivian said, her voice dropping into a clinical, analytical rhythm. Silas knows the second mortgage fraud carries federal weight because of the forged notary stamp. Callum Ashby isn't going to take the fall for him. If the authorities squeeze Callum, Callum will roll on Silas. Silas is taking whatever cash he managed to siphon and cutting his losses. What does that mean for the money? I asked. The $140,000 from the clinic? The $250,000 from the house? It means if Silas crosses state lines and disappears, recovering the physical cash will take years of forensic tracking. But for the divorce proceeding, it might actually be the best thing that could happen. I gripped the steering wheel. How is him stealing the money a good thing? Because if Silas vanishes, he defaults on his own countersuit, Vivian explained sharply. He won't show up to deposition. He won't submit his bank records. His claim to 80% of the clinic evaporates, and we hold Conrad entirely liable for the missing marital funds. The judge will award you the entirety of the clinic's remaining value, plus whatever equity is left in the house, to offset the cash Conrad lost to his brother. Conrad just effectively bankrupted himself to pay Silas, and Silas is leaving him holding the bag. There is no honor among thieves. Conrad had spent 20 years enabling his brother's entitlement, convincing me that I just needed to give Silas grace. And the moment the heat turned up, Silas packed his duffel bags and left Conrad standing in a suburban driveway with a forged mortgage and a shattered family. I need to make sure Claire gets to Margot's, I said. She's driving up now. Text me when she arrives, Vivian said. I am filing the emergency injunction at 8 a.m. Tomorrow, keep your phone on. The line went dead. I drove for another 2 hours. The rain finally stopped just south of Tacoma, leaving the highway slick and black under the streetlights. My mind kept drifting to Nora. She had packed 2 suitcases and driven away. She was 20 years old. She had access to a checking account I had funded with $3,000 for her semester expenses, but I didn't know where she would go. She wouldn't go to her friends. She was too proud, too humiliated by the idea of her family imploding. At 11:30 p.m., I finally pulled into Margot's neighborhood. Claire's blue Toyota Corolla was already parked in the driveway. I put my car in park, grabbed the manila envelope, and ran up to the front door. Margot opened it before I even knocked. She looked exhausted, wearing an oversized sweater and holding a mug of tea. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the living room. Claire was sitting on Margot's sofa. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, wrapped in a fleece blanket. A damp nylon backpack was sitting on the floor next to her. She looked up when I walked in, her face pale and blotchy from crying. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table and sat down next to her. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her into my arms. She collapsed against my shoulder, burying her face in my coat. She shook violently, her fingers digging into the fabric of my jacket. I held her tight, resting my chin against the top of her head, smelling the vanilla shampoo I had bought for her last month. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Mom, I'm so sorry I didn't believe you at first. You don't have to apologize, I said, keeping my voice steady. You didn't do anything wrong, Claire. Nothing. You were just living in the house he built. Margot quietly set a fresh mug of tea on the coaster in front of us and retreated into the kitchen, giving us space. Claire pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. He was so angry, Mom. I've never seen him like that. When Nora left, he went into the kitchen and just stood there for 10 minutes. Then he went into the garage and started throwing tools. He told Silas they were supposed to be a team. He said Silas was taking his money. Did Silas leave? Claire nodded, sniffing. He hitched the trailer to his truck. He didn't even say goodbye. He just backed out of the driveway and drove off. Dad tried to open the truck door while it was moving, but Silas had locked it. I closed my eyes. The pathetic absurdity of it. Conrad, who always needed to be the smartest man in the room, out-manipulated by a man who used to drink cheap beer on our patio and wipe grease on my linens. Did Nora call you? I asked gently. Claire shook her head. It went straight to voicemail. I checked her location on my phone, but she turned off her GP's tracking. I don't know where she went. I looked down at my hands. I had won won the legal upper hand today. I had found the ledger. I had secured the proof. But Conrad had still managed to fracture the only thing that actually mattered to me. He had driven a wedge so deep into Nora's reality that she had abandoned both of us. She'll call when she's ready. I lied. I didn't know if she would. Nora was fiercely stubborn. She had Conrad's pride, but my temper. It was a dangerous combination. You need to sleep, I told Claire, standing up. Margot set up the air mattress in the guest room. Just take your clothes off, get under the covers, and sleep. We will deal with the rest tomorrow. Claire nodded numbly. She picked up her backpack and walked down the short hallway toward the guest room. I sat alone on the sofa for a long time. The house was entirely quiet. The digital clock on the cable box read 12:45 a.m. I reached for my prepaid phone to check the battery. As the screen lit up, a new text message appeared. It wasn't from Nora. It wasn't from Vivian. It was from Conrad. He was texting my old number, the one connected to the phone sitting at the bottom of a concrete trash can in Idaho. But because we had shared an iCloud family account for years, the message had routed through my iPad, which was sitting in my overnight bag upstairs, and pushed the notification to my new device via Margot's Wi-Fi. I stared at the preview banner on the lock screen. I know you took the Elm Street ledger from Ellis. My stomach dropped. The cold, heavy feeling returned, settling right under my ribs. How did he know? I had just left Portland 3 hours ago. Ellis wouldn't have called him. Tara despised him. I unlocked the phone and opened the message thread. There was a second text beneath it. Fletcher Strand hired a private investigator yesterday morning. He pulled the toll booth cameras on I-5. He knows you drove south. He pulled Ellis's property records. I know you went to Portland. Silas is gone. I have nothing left to lose. If you file that fraud injunction tomorrow, I am going to the police with the joint tax returns you signed for the clinic in 2019. The ones you filed. The ones where you omitted Duncan Voss's cash disbursements. I sat motionless on the sofa. Outside, rain dripped from the eaves. Then I typed back, Conrad, I didn't manipulate any tax returns. And you know that. Duncan Voss is a forensic accountant with an impeccable reputation. But go ahead and call the police, because then Callum Ashby will have to explain why his notary seal is on a forged mortgage document. I put the phone down. I called Vivian. It was 1 a.m. She picked up on the second ring. He's threatening me, I said. Good, she replied. That means he's desperate. I leaned back and closed my eyes. For the first time in 20 years, silence didn't sound like defeat.